Chelsea continue winning in the Europa Conference League. This is my reaction, review, breakdown of Heidenheim 0, Chelsea 2. A game that I think expectedly was going to be Chelsea's most difficult task in at least the first phase of this competition. I feel like a lot of these games so far are really hard to analyse because the level of competition has been so poor, especially in the last case of Noah, where the game was done within like 30 minutes and it kind of became a shooting match for Chelsea, shooting practice. This game was a lot more what you'd suspect to get Europa League, and I'd even say the type of game that in a lesser extent you'd get in an old Champions League group, you know, a top 5 European League team, someone who defensively are pretty adequate and can give you some awkward moments, and that's exactly what happened tonight. I feel like this game was a great representation of the two extremes of the Chelsea B team under Enzo Maresca, because on one sense you get certain performers within it that make you stand up a little bit. One of them kind of increased as the game went on, and I didn't expect even halfway through to be saying this about this player, but I think it's deserved. And then you have more obvious ones who I think needed strong performances and they try and break into that Premier League starting 11. So I want to hear your thoughts, because I think every time we've had one of these games so far, it's like who has got closer to making their name in the starting 11 of the Premier League team. And really, I think there are 3 names that spring to mind in this game. In an attacking sense, they're the 2 goal scorers. Nkunku, who I think was arguably man of the match with someone else, and of course Mykhailo Mudryk, who, you know, I think was a little bit erratic in the first half, but I thought his ability late on in this game was very defining for Chelsea. Not only, of course, scoring the goal, but also something he did before it, which I want to see a lot more from Mykhailo Mudryk. And then, of course, Filip Jorgensen, who really stopped this game becoming a potential banana skin for Chelsea, because really defensively, Chelsea, it felt like at times were pretty open, pretty fragile, pretty vulnerable. And again, I think there is quite a bit to say on that, because I think what it shows you, as it did for the Newcastle Carabao Cup game, is that there is a discrepancy. And I personally feel it's something that needs to be addressed, because I think I may have even mentioned this in my preview. I feel like there are flaws within this squad that probably are not going to be exposed that much in this competition, because you aren't coming up against teams in the Bundesliga every time. Decent teams. You're going to be facing a lot of teams that Chelsea will likely get over the line against a majority of the time. However, if Chelsea aim, as they should, to get in the Champions League next year, that squad needs to be a lot better, because you can't be playing a B team in the Champions League, especially a B team in the new Champions League format. So in terms of short and long-term planning for Chelsea, that is something I'm slightly concerned about at the moment. But let's talk about the positives of the game. I do feel slightly sorry for Mykhailo, because of course he gets another start. I was disappointed a little bit by the starting lineup. No Josh Akipom not even travelled to this game. I think it's just a bit ridiculous. We found out today that Reece James, unsurprisingly, unfortunately, is not going to be playing again this year. So why he isn't involved, I'm not entirely sure. If he's been training with the first team. Tyreek George didn't start the game, came on very late. Carney Chukwuemeka didn't even feature in this game. He was on the bench, but, you know, really disappointing, because these are games I think those players need minutes. Yes, it was a higher caliber of opponent, but I'd argue some of the performances weren't exactly up to much, and I think there'd be players looking at certain performances. I can imagine Josh Akipom sat at home watching this game, watching Axel Disasi get overrun, bypassed several times, make errors, and look erratic as he has for all of this season so far, and wondering, why can't I get in the first team? I mean, I know it's an old thing I consistently say, but it's a football crime to me that Axel Disasi is playing for Chelsea and Trevor Chalobah is out on loan with Crystal Palace. I mean, it's just laughable, and it's things like that that just annoy me. However, we did win the game before people have a go at me for being too negative. You know, I think obviously it took a while for Chelsea to get that opening goal. I did feel during that first half, yes, Mykhailo taking a bunch of shots. He's a very raw player. I said it in my preview. I think I've said it in my ratings and gradings for the season so far. He's so raw. I think there are good attributes to him. I think he presses well from the front. He gets himself in good positions. I just wonder whether he needs a loan, because to get to the level to compete at Chelsea, he's going to need substantial senior minutes. And is he going to get that at Chelsea in the current kind of structure in the fact that Chelsea are playing these Conference League games. Sure, there's at least 2 more games he could feature in. There's the FA Cup arriving in the new year. However, I still think a loan is probably best for him. But in the nature of our attacking options, striker options, like number 9 options, I guess maybe he stays for the season, but that is something to look at. I felt Nkunku was the standout outfield player tonight, and it didn't surprise me because that is what Christopher Nkunku is. He should have scored in the first half, absolutely, with that one-on-one chance, but I think he just comes alive in those especially. It didn't surprise me that he kind of scuffed his one-on-one chances, but his goal actually came from a really tight, congested area. It seems like that's where he comes alive, and the finish in the second half was exquisite. Defensively, Chelsea looked very vulnerable at times in the first half, and Jorgensen did make a few stops. Chelsea consistently playing this offside line that we need to focus on, because this wasn't even a Premier League team. This was a defence that kept doing it, and it's clearly a strategy from Maresca. Now, Chelsea got away with it because they actually, you could argue, in fairness, Chelsea got it right in the key moments because they kept getting Heidenheim offside. However, there were moments when they weren't offside. There was one particular moment where we stupidly gave the ball away in a really bad area, and they did have a one-on-one chance that Jorgensen saved. Now, it's something that I look at with an even higher caliber of opponent, and higher caliber of opposition in the Premier League have already exploited this. It is a very passive, I think, way of defending on the edge of our box that really good teams will figure out eventually, and has cost Chelsea quite a few easy goals. And I think that's something we need to look at defensively, because it feels like too easy a route, and it feels like Chelsea are conceding a lot of goals that way, and teams are exploiting it. So it's something to be concerned by. So there was a long period in that second half when it looked like Chelsea were just struggling to hang on. We weren't really gaining a foothold in the game. The midfield wasn't giving us that. Defensively, there were lapses in concentration. They were getting out wide. It wasn't a counter-attacking game anymore, where Chelsea had a lot of the ball trying to break Heidenheim down. Their hostile end of the ground was very much pushing them forward. And Jorgensen, who really hasn't had much to do, or much so far that gives us a reason to seriously analyse him. Again, I said this at the start of this show. It's very difficult to analyse this Chelsea team in the Conference League because of the level of opposition. However, I think tonight you have to factor in the Bundesliga team and also the saves he made. Really, for the first time, Jorgensen kind of standing up and going, is there a reason for me to be starting in the Premier League over Robert Sanchez? I feel like Jorgensen doesn't have to do much to get into that conversation, I have to say, because the problem that Jorgensen, I still think has, I worry he has a similar problem to Robert Sanchez, in the sense that there was at least a couple of shaky moments. There was one in particular in the second half where his distribution just wasn't that good. And, again, wasn't a reason to buy Jorgensen about his distribution. And you're kind of left in a situation, again, where you've bought a goalkeeper who may be limited on that. But in terms of what we really care about of a goalkeeper, his shot stopping and, in terms of assertiveness, keeping a clean sheet, which Chelsea don't keep many, I think is well commendable, and I can already see, because I've recorded this a little bit later to other people, I've seen already the headlines and titles from this game is all about Jorgensen. I understand it, because there is a clamour, there should be competition. Robert Sanchez should not be the comfortable first choice in the Premier League, and maybe tonight was a potential turning point for Filip Jorgensen. I would be shocked if he comes directly into the first team. Obviously, Petrovic came in last season at a similar time, but that was mainly predicated on Robert Sanchez. I think it literally was sparked by Robert Sanchez getting injured. So I'm not entirely sure Maresca is going to be forced into that choice yet, but at the very least, Jorgensen does what he should be doing in these games and showing that he can help Chelsea out, which is good. I feel that Nkunku, he should have maybe scored a little bit more, and arguably, based on the chances he had, he could have scored at least 3, but I really do feel like we're getting to that stage now where a decision has to be made, and I think Nkunku, especially with the amount of games coming up, he needs to be starting a few more Premier League games. I think he is a level raiser. I think he's a good goal scorer, a natural goal scorer. I don't think you should be overlooking those players, and I'd like to see him start a game pretty soon in the Premier League. The other player, of course, is Mykhailo Mudryk, who very much has had to take this competition by the scruff of the neck and make it his own. And, in the last 2 Conference League games, he's done that with 2 brilliant finishes from his right foot. Now, I do think that there was a moment where Chelsea were under a serious pressure where Mudryk used his speed really well. And he pulled away. It looked like he was going to get maybe even a shot on goal. And he was pulled down by a Heidenheim player. And it, very much alleviated the pressure. one of the things I've criticised about Mudryk is his lack of game intelligence at times and not using his greatest attribute, which is his speed. And that's exactly what he should be doing. And I think it was a moment of game intelligence that he needs to be showing more consistently. It's a small thing, but it helped his team out. He didn't try and do something stupid. In the Arsenal game, he was in a really bad position where he couldn't use his speed to the best of his ability to alleviate pressure. He needs to be doing that a lot more. And of course, nice work from Sancho down the right. Nice little bit of interplay, but really good finish. Ruthless finish from Mykhailo Mudryk, and that ended the game. Of course, Azari Cassidy getting a second yellow, which maybe was a little bit harsh, but I don't think his performance was anything to scream about. Dewsbury Hill should have scored a little bit earlier. And, I don't want to end on a downer, but my defensive concerns are still there. That Axel Disasi simply not good enough. I think Tosin had some shaky moments. I think Tosin is the best of the kind of second choice. I know Ben Morbad. To be fair to Ben Morbadiashile, he had a really solid performance against Leicester, arguably similar tonight. I still think that there are major concerns in this squad in midfield and defence when you look beyond the first choice options, or at least what I would deem first choice options. And that is something that, again, I think the club has to look at, because in this competition, it probably isn't going to matter. So for the time being, does it really need saying? I think for the long term, when we move into hopefully a higher calibre of European competition, when you're having to juggle the Champions League and the Premier League, you need to have a better calibre of player to come in. That drop can't be as severe. And also later on in this competition, when I suspect the likes of Fofana, Lavia and Cole Palmer will come into the squad, you're going to have to start using those players eventually. You'd think, as you take this competition seriously, you've got this far already. So Astana and Shamrock Rovers to go. I suspect those two games will be back to the level of competition Chelsea faced in the first three games. So again, maybe you're back into a situation where it's kind of harder to judge the quality of opponent and how serious you take the performances. But individually, Jorgensen, Nkunku and Mykhailo Mudryk. I know Jorgensen, I think will probably get man of the match by most people, but I think Nkunku deserves a shout, and of course Mudryk sealing up. So those are my thoughts on the game. We'll obviously be turning attention quickly to the Villa game. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Follow, subscribe, all of that good stuff, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.